Hi, this is Sid Brandy. I'm here with Ramon, and we're going to discuss how we can make a password manager that is both convenient and secure. And the idea is that everyone needs a password manager, but the existing password managers are either from like the big companies and they make it hard to share and work cross-platform, or they're from great companies like 1Password or LastPass, but they're a paid product and that hinders adoption. So the consequence is that 90% of users today don't have a password manager. And we think we can make a password manager that is both affordable and we can afford to have people use for free and convenient. And the idea is to use an existing code base. Bitwarden is a good open source password manager. But the thing is, the authentication costs a lot of money. Like you have to deal with people losing their authentication and prevent people signing in inappropriately. But luckily, Apple and Google already do a great job of like signing people in. They have a bit of an advantage. They're on mobile and stuff like that. So we're just going to allow people to sign in with either their Apple or Google account. That takes care of like the vast majority of the costs. And I want to make sure it's super secure. And many password managers have you type a super long password, but people tend to forget that. So that's not an option for us. At the same time, we do want super high security. So Ramon's going to sketch a solution that he's developed to achieve that.
Yeah, thank you. So the main thing that we've been looking for is a secure way to store what in the other password managers is the user's password, which is used to enable to use the password manager. So right now, for other password managers, that is stored in the human's brain. We, like Sid just explained, we don't believe that is the right way to go. So we've actually been looking at like different options, and what I've been Sid just shared the screen, but I can actually explain it better, I think. So the problem right now, the main problem, if you just take away that local encryption key or client-side encryption key, is that the server, the Tilig server, would have access to the decrypted passwords for users. So in the case of like a security incident, that would be not a good situation for Tilig. It would also mean that like users have to put way more trust in a product like Tilig than they would in 1Password. So ideally, we want to reach the scenario where the server does not have access to the decrypted secrets, but only the client has it. So what we went looking for was a way to use the client-side authentication that we already wanted to use through like Google or Apple, to use that authentication to store a encryption and a decryption key on a different location than in a different network than Tilig. And there's actually like two different ways to go about this that we've investigated, and I'm still kind of on the fence which one is the best to do. So I think I'll just explain both of them. The main one that we've been discussing now is to go with an external database. In this case, that we looked into Firebase real-time database. The great thing about Firebase is that it offers a tool set for developers to quickly build applications on the client side. What they offer us is they offer us a way to have clients talk directly to the database without having to go through the Tilig network, through the Tilig servers. This would mean that a client would first request all the encrypted secrets from the Tilig server, and then request the encryption key or the decryption key from the Firebase database, and use those two to decrypt the secrets on the client side. This means that the decrypted secrets will never leave the client side. The only problem from a security standpoint with this is that the the Firebase database is still managed by Tilig. It's not hosted in our network, so it's like less exposed than it was previously, but it still means that potentially there is a risk when, for instance, a infrastructure engineer at Tilig gets, how do you call it?
Compromised.
Compromised, yes. The other solution that we looked into that actually doesn't have this same problem is to use a hybrid between Apple CloudKit and Google Drive. So the reason that this is two different solutions is that each of the solutions is tied to the authentication layer that we use. So Google, if we authenticate users with Apple, they can't use that to authenticate with Google Drive. If a user is authenticated with Google, they can't use that to authenticate with CloudKit. And so that's sort of the reason why we took two separate paths, where we would need two separate paths. The great thing about this solution, though, is that Tilig would have no control over. Actually, oh, it's actually still live. Okay, I'll just continue without it. Sorry. So let me describe this this solution. So what we would do is we would use the Google Drive or the Google API to authenticate and to actually, like, we need to request permission from the user. We would request their permission to access their Google Drive and to create a small file, a small file in the Google Drive that will contain their decryption key. By doing this, the key will always be in control of the user, and Tilig would only have access to that key if the user gives Tilig access, like allows Tilig to access that key. This key, and this would actually, by the way, like I didn't mention this, but this would be the private key for the user. The public key would be stored on the Tilig servers so that we could allow for sharing, but that's like a different part. So the private key would be stored in their Google Drive, and every time the user signs in, we can actually use the client-side Google libraries to fetch their key from Google Drive and use that to decrypt the secrets on the client side. The way to make this secure is to never let the Google token leave the client side. So there's different ways to authenticate users with Google. One of those is to actually share a token with the server side and use that token then to authorize access to APIs. But in order for this to be secure, we would rely on authenticating users on the client side and then validating that in the server side by using the ID token. For Apple, it would actually be a lot like simpler and more straightforward, because Apple offers CloudKit, and part of CloudKit is a way to, or part of CloudKit is actually a private database for users. And this database is not accessible by Tilig outside of like when users give us permission to. And so both actually form like a similar approach where we store a key somewhere on a place, and ideally this place is not in the control of Tilig. It's not something that we can access. Like ideally, this is a place where users are able to give us access or get rid of the access, and that's where we store the private key. And that private key can then be used and distributed between like the different like devices that users sign into. When we do this, that means that there is a good path for recovery for users. So whenever a user loses their device, they're still able, like if they're able to get into their Google account or their Apple account, they are also able to get into Tilig. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to say here. No, I think that's the main gist of it.
Cool, thanks for that. If I would contrast the two solutions, I'd say you can have the, let's say the cloud, the public cloud private key, where you use CloudKit and the likes, but it's more inconvenient for the user because they have to kind of sign in another time. Or you can use Firebase, which is more convenient for the user, but it is infrastructure that we control. Now, I think the downsides of that are relatively low because I've not heard of a lot of like AWS accounts getting compromised through like hacking that user. It's much more likely that like there's a bug somewhere in your application and someone does an RC or something else. I've seen that like 100 times more. So that's how I see those two things. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. One thing that I would note though is that we are capable of trusting devices in the same way that like current password managers do that. So the double sign-in for Apple CloudKit would be like a worst case scenario. It would be something that you have to do the first time, but it would be like a backup place, right? It would be backed up there, but then once you're signed in on your device, it will be cached on your device, that key. So that's, but then other than that, I agree that that it's still like the Firebase solution is like is an elegant solution. I'm not like I don't. Yeah, I'm not 100% certain about like whether I checked all the different boxes in terms of security. Like the biggest issue that I see is that me as a Tilig engineer, I still technically have access to all the things that are needed to decrypt your secrets. And in the case of Google Drive or Apple CloudKit, I would not have the access in place to decrypt your secrets. The only thing I would be able to do still, so let's play this scenario. I am someone like I'm a rogue agent inside Tilig. In this scenario, I would technically, of course, still be able to commit rogue code into the client side that still, decrypts things. So if we are gonna like assume that scenario, I'm not sure whether it's actually a valid scenario because like I would still be able to do the wrong things. I guess.
Yeah, I think if you either it's a malintentioned engineer or something like that, like you will always have auto updating code. It is the standard. So that's kind of like whoever has those signing keys to sign a new release of anything, that's still a weak part of the chain. I think it's really hard to work around that. If you suppose it's an external hacker and they got an RCE in the majority of our server code, how would they, apart from updating the client to kind of just transmit the secrets to them, how else, is there a way to talk to Firebase, or does Firebase always depend on an OAuth login? Do they have to like siphon off that OAuth login?
So Firebase has access rules, which in this case, like in the POC I created, were set to you are only allowed to make changes or to read the line that you also own yourself. And so in this case, that would mean that like users sign in and they are only allowed to access their own decryption key. I do expect that like Firebase has APIs like for the admins, but like my thinking is that should all be like, it should be possible to stop all of that. If they do, however, have a possibility to make changes to the rules from the network, then that could potentially pose a problem. But I don't think that is like a problem from our network. Like if that is a problem, then it's a problem everywhere, because we wouldn't be keeping credentials to Firebase in our server infrastructure. Right, like there is no reason for our servers to be talking to that Google account, to the Firebase account. So we would be keeping those keys, like maybe even like not even on the developer machines. You just create that account once, you lock it away somewhere in a vault, and it's working, right? Like, because it's a fully managed database. It just does what it's supposed to do. Like as long as you keep doing that, I think that like there's no way other than making changes to the code.
Cool. Talk about defense in depth. Is there another way to increase the defense further? And I'm thinking, for example, the application, the central SaaS service, has the encoded passwords. Could we add something like very good security that even we don't see those decoded passwords? So it would be really hard, even if you'd compromise Firebase, there would still be this additional hurdle to kind of hack everyone at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think that would actually be a good idea. The current like defense in depth is already that like the data that is stored in the database is like encrypted an extra time by use of like KMS and or AWS KMS, and AWS like KMS has all this security built in already. It takes a lot longer to run that request. It will be a lot harder for a hacker to actually like decrypt like all of the things all at once. So I think there's already like defense in depth in there, but like yeah, something like very good security I think would be a really good way of even further hardening the infrastructure. Especially because like you're sort of handing over the management of the data to like a party that is actually specialized in that.
Yeah, you'd have to attack both the central SaaS app and Firebase and very good security. Like at some point, it just gets to be a lot of work, and there's the odds of us detecting it in time go up.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Even better would be if very good security would offer a Firebase-like database that would be authenticatable straight from the client, and it would actually like once we would do that, and like then it would be completely out of our sight and out of our hands, and I think that would be only better.
Yeah, but that depends on their offering. I think
exactly.
I
Yeah,
think they offer something to kind of known endpoints, like, hey, you are always communicating with XYZ. So we have to look into whether they can communicate just with a whole bunch of clients instead.
Yep.
And then still maybe we put something in between, but we put that on another cloud, another piece of infrastructure, so that after very, very good security, it's on another cloud, a Google cloud that then talks with all the clients. So you'd have to compromise both our like AWS infrastructure or Heroku infrastructure and GCP infrastructure. Yeah, you said you mentioned the sharing of accounts. That's where things get hard, and I think in some other password managers, usability suffers a bit, where you have to create a vault first and then invite people, and only then can you share it with someone. We want very easy shareability, where you can just add an email address. How does the sharing work in a world where the passwords are encoded with the private key of a user?
So the solution that I have in mind is, like I said, like using public-private key pair. The public key would be accessible to everybody. What that means is that when I have a account or secret that I want to share with you, I would ask for the server for your public key, and we would use that public key to encrypt the secret again for you. For you, it will actually look like it's the same thing. And but that means that from that point on, every time someone makes changes to the secret, it has to be ported the other way. which means that it is an N+1, which means that like if you have a secret that is like shared with 20 people, it will take some longer time to actually get them encrypted because you will have to encrypt it 20 times. However, so far in my testing, that's not that big of a deal because CPUs are fast enough right now. But it does require some bookkeeping.
And we're focused on the individual users, so that's fine. So the smart thing here is you don't store it once, like where other solutions say, hey, we're going to store it once and give everyone the private key or something like that. We just say, we're going to brute force this. We just store it 5 times with 5 different encodings, and that's fine. I think that's a great solution.
Yeah, and I do think just because it's bookkeeping and bookkeeping is hard, I would suggest that aside from like the encrypted value, we would also store hashed value so that we're able to detect it when like something goes wrong with the bookkeeping. Like you wanna know that the hashes are the same, like the hash of the decrypted value.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was thinking about something else.
Sorry, so like if I have a secret and I'm sharing it with you and like 5 others, and halfway through the sharing or halfway through my change, my internet drops out or something goes wrong, I don't know. You could end up in a situation where 3 people are looking at a different secret than like the others. And so there
so
would be no way for
either make an atomic change and like encode it and send it back to everyone, including yourself, in one commit to the server, or hash the unencrypted password with a one-way hash function and make sure that everyone is up to date.
Right, so just so that like at a later stage, if something goes wrong, the engineers in Tilig can check whether the hashes are the same to see whether they're still like they're actually still the same value. That's the only way to I think we can detect whether the values are still the same behind like the different encryption keys.
Cool. We now spend a lot of time on maintaining our infrastructure and the microservices, and at some point you said, if I'd had to do this again, I'd just do something on Heroku. Well, can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, no, I'm a firm I'm a firm believer that like a lot of the complexity, like going with a microservices solution will add a lot of complexity. And I believe that like if you're going to have to maintain a Kubernetes cluster, you're going to have to spend time on that. Like spend time on making sure it keeps running, spend time on making sure you have logging running, all that sort of stuff. And I believe that that's what Heroku is just really good at. In the end, I feel that as a company matures, there might be more reason to split things off. But for a small, young company, I believe that you want to keep things together as much as possible. You want to rely on a small, how do you say it, like a small number of dependencies. So if you go with the Kubernetes cluster, that's like 15 dependencies added to your stack. Those dependencies all get like regular updates. You have to maintain that. And so that's one of the things. The other thing is, I believe that you should go with something like Rails because it's like, it's used by a lot of companies. A lot of smart people are worrying about the security of it. It has a lot of secure and sane defaults. So opposed to going with something like, building your own rack server because you feel it needs to be more secure because you have total control, I don't believe that actually works that way. And then, it's really just about like the cost of maintaining, because like the more, and it's the same with like the databases that we store at Firebase or maybe at like very good security, the less we have to maintain ourselves, the less we have to worry about keeping something running, the more time we have on actually building the right things for our customers.
Yeah, I think we went down the path of kind of, we need microservices because we're going to maintain kind of separation of concerns. And I think what we learned is we want to move those other concerns over to SaaS services who are specialized in it and have a scale who can handle that. We're unlikely to be the only target. So we don't have to do anything special in our app because we're moving that concern to specialists. instead of doing it ourselves. Would you build it, if you'd build it again, would you build it in Rails? Because a lot of the complexity is easier to implement and there's a lot of same security defaults, or would you go for something like Go or something else that is that has a reputation of being more robust because it's static and simpler?
I guess it depends on like the what the person who's going to build it is most capable building. Like if this person is like a really strong Go person with a lot of experience building production Go systems, then probably that could be better. In my experience, though, like a lot of this, a lot of the stuff that Tilig is going to have to worry about is like moving fast, building a robust backend, and I think that's really where Rails shines, because there's like thousands of people around the world relying on it for the same reason. I don't think, like, of course, like Tilig, is worried about security, but so is Shopify, or so is, other big companies that run Rails. And I just feel that like it's going to be, especially with like the client-side encryption, Rails is going to be the right choice.
That makes sense to me. What did we learn client-wise? I think now we try to make our own client, and I think we kind of learned that the first 90% is pretty easy, but that from 90 to 99.99 is extremely hard, is 4 times as much work, or maybe 4 orders of magnitude more work.
Yeah.
And that we should really make it look at Bitwarden and fork from that, even though it might not be the code base that we would love.
Yeah.
At least it solved a lot of problems.
Yeah. So it's actually funny, like if we take Bitwarden out of the picture, one of the lessons that I would say I have learned is that write once, deploy everywhere does not always work as advertised. In my experience, those type of solutions end up end up with a system that has a lot of if statements that check like, oh, are we on Android? Are we on iOS? Are we in the browser? That's my opinion. I did learn like that, like Bitwarden is using Xamarin to deploy .NET code to both iOS and Android. So maybe, we just didn't use the right tool for this. The other thing I would say is that like, there is I think there's almost like an FTE per platform that you want to support, that you should calculate. Like whenever you have, like, if you deploy an iOS app, the users are going to expect you to come up with like bug fixes to make sure it runs correctly, and that is going to take time. You also are going to need someone who keeps on being familiar with the code base, who keeps on updating the app and actually sending the updates, making the screenshots, all that sort of stuff. And so for a 1-person or 2-person startup, I would say that leads me to conclude that there is reason to make a choice. Like, are we going to support Android or are we going to support iOS? Like, of course, in the end, Tilig needs to support all of that, but an Android user is not going to have an iOS phone, probably. Right? Like an Android user probably is not going to have to use Tilig on their iOS phone as well. So, there's probably like, there's some ways to make sure that Tilig has less, that it's easier to maintain, especially because in the early stages of the company, you're going to be iterating really quickly on features. And it's just going to be really painful if you're going to have to build the same feature like 4 times. And then find out that it like doesn't work and that you need something else. So I would really say like focus on a platform. That being said, I do think that gives like the better developed or the more well-known password managers in Edge, because they have so many like platforms supported. So yes, going back to like the original thing, that's probably why like going with something like the Bitwarden code base is a good choice, because they already support all the browsers, they already support iOS and Android, and they have a desktop app.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think we should do what you say and start again. If we start this again, we focus on a few platforms. You mentioned Android. I think with Android, you're going to have users who are more cost conscious and who are not prepared to pay like they have to do with many existing platforms. So that makes sense. in addition, you probably need something for the desktop. Would that be the Chrome plugin, or what would you do there? What's the minimum set of kind of front ends? Android plus?
Yeah, I think I'm like my gut says browser. Like I believe the browser extension is really important, because when people need passwords on their computer, like 9 times out of 10, they also have a browser because they are connected to the internet. Yeah, I would say a browser extension, especially like in this day and age when there is one extension format which is supported by almost all major browsers. So by using the, I forgot the name, but like the web extension format, you can actually deploy the same extension to Edge, to Chrome, to Firefox, and to Safari in the latest version.
Cool. So kind of the minimum team for this startup, in my mind, would be a CEO who also focuses on the marketing, Android, browser, backend, and security engineers.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing I would note that like one thing that we kept on banging our heads like against the wall on was like you need someone who can connect with the user, because typically we're like aiming for users who currently are not convinced that they need a password manager, or at least like that's how I interpret it. It could be current users who are convinced that they need a password manager but don't find don't think there is a right one for them. But usually it feels like we have to convince people that this is a good idea. And so I do think it's really important to stress that that there is someone who is like experienced with that, or like capable in like handling that type of situation.
Cool. And is that more of a like a UX person, or more of a kind of marketing person?
Yeah, I'm going back and forth between the both. I think UX is going to be more important. Someone who can talk to users and figure out the personas, figure out how to talk to certain users. But like it all starts with the marketing page, because that's where like 100% of the users start, and converting people from there to the app is also going to be a very important part. I just feel that like the UX person probably will be more successful doing that than the marketing person will be doing the UX stuff.
Cool. I think we need probably also a person full-time on kind of marketing PR to kind of raise visibility. And then you probably also want someone kind of focused on viral growth with sharing and things like that, and interpreting that data.
Yeah, one thing I would note, like one lesson from like the past try basically is like I think we focus too much on advertising, as in like the marketing attention that we had and the people that we had on marketing were like 90% focused on advertising. And I actually believe that should like it should be less about advertising and more about converting users when they're on the marketing pages, reaching back out to users with emails, sending them like a reminder like, hey, did you know that you can install this? Or have you tried installing Tilig on your Android phone? That sort of thing.
I totally agree. I think we used ads to at least have like statistical significance, like know what was working or not, but it doesn't, for a free product, you cannot use that as a long-term growth strategy. So it's the PR person who gets free press. It's a growth person with like virality, like inviting, sharing passwords to other users, maybe some ads, maybe some email. And then the UX person who also like has an opinion on how the homepage should look, what onboarding should look like.
Yep.
Cool. How hard do you think it is to take the Bitwarden code base and build in this authenticate via Firebase and get a private key from there?
I think it would be hard. The main problem that I see is that Bitwarden is a pretty like old code base. Like it's been through a couple of years, and typically when you have something like that, there's like all these hidden business rules that are like hidden away in the code that make it harder to divert from the path. That being said, the code base is a .NET code base on the back end and a TypeScript / Angular code base on the front end, which are all technologies that I don't have a lot of experience with, and so someone with more experience in that field might feel different. I still think that aside from like the technical problem, I still think that a code base that is so old has like a lot of beliefs written into it and like buried away that are going to be probably harder to mitigate. One thing that could, and this is actually something that I'm thinking of now, I do think that they introduced biometrics not so long ago. It could actually be like a good idea to look at like the commits that are related to the biometrics change to see, because technically biometrics is also probably going to be like an extra layer of encryption. So that might actually be like be a good way to estimate how much work it's going to be.
Cool. Sorry, thanks, Ramon, for this conversation. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Have a good one.